times, as Sumit has mentioned, in really the data center technology landscape, things that are changing on the edge of the smart technologies, and how is that driven back into that data center infrastructure. This has been a tremendous week from an engagement perspective as we continue to look at the modernization. I think I've had 13 meetings so far this week, or events, and every customer is thinking about the future. How does that relate to my infrastructure? How do I provide a better user experience for our customers, whether it's my internal customers or if I'm serving the user experience? I have to make sure that complete data path is able to take advantage of the SLAs that I want to continue to give my customer. And when we think about the overall modernization, and we've heard modernization at multiple different layers already today, Sumit covered a little bit on the NVMe side. So as NVMe becomes that de facto protocol standard, this will not be individually vendor driven. This is a community of vendors driving this open standard to improve the efficiency of how we communicate at a protocol level within the data center. This will allow that user experience to continue to improve as the mobile smart city infrastructure continues to require faster response times. We have to make sure that internal infrastructure, where that application is sitting, where that data is sitting as they access that information, continues to keep up with the change of pace of the users wanting that information. NVMe, faster technology, will allow our users to continue to do that. One of the biggest challenges most agencies, whether it's private or public enterprise environments, face is the amount of human effort that it takes, or processes within the organization to get tasks done. And as we look at automation, it really comes back into process change. We have the technology to take advantage of automation today. We want to make sure that we continue to improve the process side of automation, simplify the tasks required either on the deployment side, the operational side, the management side of these environments, to streamline, again, providing that better user experience, making things invisible within that infrastructure so the data can get to where it needs to get to. And if there's challenges along the way, we can automatically be able to move traffic flows or traffic patterns to the fastest possible path to get to that end device or get back into the user. Starts in the infrastructure, ends out in that smart infrastructure where that user is sitting, whether it's on their phone, in their house, in their cars, wherever that may be. Automation has to be enabled as we continue to move forward and drive those changes. And then lastly, analytics becoming a huge important play as we look at the automation side. How do we take advantage of the intelligence, automatically, programmability of that environment as we continue to move forward? How do we move those flows in a more efficient manner moving? From a trend aspect, I think everybody will agree, storage is growing, probably faster than we're capable of sometimes storing it. And that's where having the predictable automation and analytics comes into play to continue to improve. Where is that storage going to sit? Does it need to sit in that physical infrastructure, or do we need to move it closer to the end user? And being able to do that automatically, move it programmatically, so the user doesn't have to manually go do those changes, will allow a more effective communication string, but again, better SLAs back into that environment. We're seeing flash come down, so when we say 90% of storage arrays are all flash driven, a lot of that has to do just to the economics of flash coming down closer to where traditional spinning media is. But this again allows operationally our customers to deploy their applications where they want to at any given time because of the flash improvements, but then also moving forward the protocol improvements with NVMe. A lot of customers are thinking about the cloud and that user experience and what does that mean to their environment. And had a lot of conversations this week about what cloud means to the customers of India. And a lot of it has come back to the user expectations of that infrastructure. So no matter if it's within your particular environment or it's a cloud attribute or service or self-service infrastructure, cloud is becoming a play at multiple different layers within the particular infrastructure moving forward. And to tie it together, you need the security aspect. Sumit highlighted the dedicated infrastructure as we build our storage. One of the biggest things that we look at when we do development is continuing to think about security first. If you don't solve security up front, somebody else will exploit that, which ends up being very damaging to the company or potentially to the agency if there is any type of compromise. So we want to make sure that that is an encrypted infrastructure, secure infrastructure, and again, by eliminating some of the human tasks that are involved, we can streamline best practices to provide better security inherently throughout that data communication string as we continue to move forward. So from a Gartner perspective, as we look at kind of the future from a protocol aspect, throughout my meetings this week, most of our customers here within India are deploying multiple different types of storage architectures, and that's the trend that I've been seeing globally across the world. They have their storage infrastructure built on fiber channel. They have portions of their environment built on IP-based architectures as well. But as we look at the future of all flash, what NVMe is doing to those storage architectures, we're going to continue to see multiple different storage architectures being deployed for different types of services from an application perspective. So this gives the classification back to the customer or the agency to be able to decide what type of storage they should be deploying on. As we look at the future, it will come back down into what the customer wants to do, when they want to do it, and again, back to the intelligence built in to some of the overall architecture. This was an interesting slide that actually just got presented yesterday back at the Gartner conference in the US. So as customers are looking what type of architecture to put that storage on, 82% of the respondents live in the audience said they're either going to continue to build out their fiber channel environment or maintain that is already there. Within the next 18 to 24 months, pretty much everything that gets purchased from a storage aspect will be NVMe capable to, again, enhance that user experience and really drive the optimization as we continue to move forward. When we look at the network choice around modernization, again, when we start looking at performance, latency, what happens when congestion happens, this is where you start tying in the more efficient architecture, the more efficient way to look at analytics and predictability of that overall environment. So what happens when anomalies happen in the infrastructure, which a lot of times the technology, if it's not built right up front, can't take advantage of when that happens. A prime example, if you look at all the roundabouts within Delhi, how do you streamline the fast application through the roundabout? What happens when there's a slow car, bike, walker that hits that roundabout? You want to isolate that so those fast cars that need to get through the roundabout have a dedicated path and they don't have to stop and wait for potentially a slow congested device. And this is the things that are happening behind the scenes that happen automatically when you look at a brocade infrastructure to be able to move traffic flows around depending on what we see in that environment. And again, it happens with zero touch from that application or really the user down into that storage environment, and we'll continue to drive that. So the last thing we want is to have the fast application have to stop at the roundabout, and then the application performance decreases because of that. That's the last thing we want within these type of architectures. So when we look at infrastructure refresh, as we've heard earlier today with the smart trends that are happening at the edge, at the user level, without thinking about the complete data path within that infrastructure, we've seen where the end devices get faster, whether it's a server, whether it's storage, and if the infrastructure is not refreshed at the same time, we potentially see the congestion point just move to another location. So how do we take and streamline that for new applications, new deployments? We want to make sure that that infrastructure is upgraded at the same time as the endpoints, so we don't have to worry about anything within that data path potentially being impacted by the newer endpoints, especially when all flash arrays start being deployed, as well as other aspects within that infrastructure. So when we look at automation, it starts with all flash. It starts with the enhanced protocol, which allows us to do parallelism for the first time within the storage protocol. So now we can have that application essentially talking to multiple endpoints at the same time versus on a one-to-one communication string, and then really automating the overall processes that happen. I like to look at automation as not, replacing people or humans. It replaces the jobs or the tasks that they had to do on a daily basis. As we look at current infrastructure today, with a lot of existing components that have to keep operationally and running for the agency or for the government entity, we want a portion of that time on any given day to be focused on how do we become more strategic, how do we plan better, how do we implement better processes within the overall organization, and automation will continue to improve that as we want to continue to look forward. One thing with NVMe for your current infrastructures, a lot of times when new technology comes out, the last thing people think about is, oh, I got to refresh my infrastructure, I got to rip and replace. But Brocade had the forethought when we started building our chipsets back in 2009. We saw some of the things happening from a standardization aspect around NVMe. So products that we've been shipping since 2011 will support NVMe. So you do not have to rip and replace your Gen 5 or your Gen 6 infrastructure to support NVMe. So when you start looking at these new storage arrays or new platforms, rest assured that you do not have to go physically rip and replace that network to be able to move the new improved storage communication around NVMe or all flash-based architectures within this overall paradigm as we look at the modernization as it relates to newer technology. Now, with the newer architectures, you'll be able to take advantage of some other visibility aspects. But if your goal is just to move the data from point A to point B, your current infrastructure more likely will be able to support NVMe within that environment. And then lastly, around the automation front, we've had a strategic kind of look at what we want to provide our customers. Every customer has a different terminology as they look at automation. Some of it is just process improvements, some of it's improvements on the programmability of the actual physical infrastructure. So automation ties in at multiple different levels if you're a CIO or CTO to completely overhaul and become more of an autonomous type infrastructure, and then from a human aspect. So when we look at automation, it's being able to provide the tool sets to the right teams at multiple different levels within that IT organization, whether they want to communicate natively to the Brocade infrastructure or they want to provide that information into their own orchestration framework. So we'll tie information through automation into our partner ecosystem. So if you're currently using a storage tool for management and monitoring, we'll provide that information up the stack to our third party. If you want to write custom applications, which we have a lot of customers looking to take advantage of, you have the flexibility to write natively to our switches to get the information that you want in a timely manner for your particular use case around that. And then lastly, very open. So we heard earlier about vendor lock-in driven. When we looked at doing our automation strategy, it's all about doing what the industry is already doing around open standards with the REST APIs, and then also publishing these to the open community. So you don't have to go to some add-on license to go get certain scripts from the Brocade or the Broadcom side. As long as you have access to the internet, you can go pull down our automation templates, our automation scripts that take advantage of automation within your environment today. So as we continue to move forward in this modernization path, again, it's a strategic conversation, it's a strategic path. As you look at your overall infrastructure and that data communication path from the user all the way down into that physical infrastructure, multiple different components. And one recommendation I've been giving a lot of the customers that I talk to is find one small project to see where you can look at automation and streamlining, and then start looking for additionals after you get get comfortable with the concept. And a lot of it comes back to working with the teams and changing the overall process to take advantage of some of the newer aspects of this. Again, thank you for your time today, and hopefully you get some additional insights out of some of the fireside chats, and then also the panel that we have this morning. Thank you.